Welcome to the Badlands, a place I don't think I or anyone I'm going to talk to expected to be. My name is Jared, and for the last 9 months, I've been an out-of-work ad agency senior suit. My last role was the Regional Client Service Director at Grey Singapore, delivering work around Southeast Asia and India. I returned to London last year, fully imagining I'd been in another agency fairly quickly, as had been the case over the last 2 decades, but not so much this time. So I found myself wandering the Badlands. In these 9 months, I've noticed a few odd things in our industry, and I've also noticed a surprising amount of ex-colleagues and clients all in a similar position to me. So I thought it might be helpful and maybe interesting to talk to some of these people, to see how they're doing, discover their experiences, understand what they're looking for, and maybe shine a light on them and their talents. But most importantly, check in with them, as it's a lonely experience being in the Badlands. So please welcome Rhea Fox. Rhea is a highly experienced digital marketing director whom I was introduced to a few months back by a former guest, as they had previously been colleagues together. It was clear that Rhea was heading for the Badlands due to being part of the much publicised Ted Baker administration issues, which I'm sure she'll touch on. So today we discuss her slow and inevitable descent into the Badlands, her take on the Ted Baker issue, and how she's been navigating her job search whilst winding down her role. So please welcome Rhea Fox. Rhea, how are you?
Morning, Jared. I'm really good, thanks. Yeah, I am well this week.
Welcome.
Well, I was just going to say thanks for the intro. Slow as inevitable slide into the Badlands indeed.
Well, it was funny because I kind of have fun writing these little intros I do with people, and it was yours has been this weird. Like I said, we met a few months ago, having been introduced to each other by. I think I've actually interviewed like I'm fucking Michael Parkinson. I've talked to a couple of people that I think you've worked with over your career, which I'm sure you'll touch on in a second. But we got in touch because you were part of that awful kind of Ted Baker winding up, and it's been on your horizon for months and months. And I know you kind of started your search months and months ago, which is why you qualify for the Badlands, because I think technically it's only been a few weeks, but given you were faced with that awful thing that was happening, I just thought it'd be interesting for people to hear about that type of situation where a redundancy is happening, and even starting the search in that time, it's still not normal days as it has been over the last maybe 10, 20, 30 years. It's a bit different at the moment, so which is why I think you're a great guest. So I appreciate you taking the time to
no worries. No, thank you, and thanks for making the exception as well.
Well, no. It's changing all the time. Is this thing what I set out to do on this? It changed day 2, from an idea point of view. So I'm just talking to interesting people who've got interesting stories and who are job hunting in these kind of crazy times that we all seem to be job hunting in. So more and more people qualify, unfortunately. So look, I think the first thing to do is give everyone a bit of a sense of Rhea Fox. And you've worked at some amazing places. I left them off because I just thought it's so cool for you to be able to talk about some of the stuff you've done and some of the big brands you've worked at, and maybe then we'll end on what happened at Ted Baker. And isn't it the marketing team's fault?
We'll definitely have a good chat about that. We will definitely have a good chat.
Someone will be blaming marketing somewhere in that particular drama.
Well, I actually saw a great article just yesterday about the demise of Ted from Neil Saunders at Global Data, who absolutely did blame the marketing amongst other things. So it was early out of the traps for the finger point. But
well, look, give everyone your full career flavour, and then we can maybe touch on Ted Baker.
Cool, thank you. And I'll try and do it without boring the arse of everybody. But it's just a chat. I actually started live. I've got a really unusual career path, and sometimes that can mean, I know we'll get onto it, but recruiters and clients, they really don't know what to make of it. But I started live in customer insight and strategy, and did that for kind of 15 years in a fairly typical kind of insight capacity. Worked in a couple of one-to-one ad agencies. I know we've got old colleagues in common on that front, and then did a couple of stints at GHD Hair Care and at Direct Line Group. And sort of did that until I got to eBay about 10 years ago, and then sort of pivoted into doing other stuff. So I was European Insight Director, I seconded as UK Trading Director, worked on kind of global segmentation. And I guess that's where I got my feel for doing stuff outside of Insight and got the itch to do it. So I guess since leaving there in 2018, I've done a really hands-on meeting marketing role at Aviva, and I guess most recently, I suppose, second career pivot and a proper one was that I've spent the last 3 years as digital director in a variety of kind of fashion and adjacent businesses. So most recently, as you said, digital director at Ted Baker for UK and Europe, and then before that, very similar roles at Paperchase and at Monsoon Accessorize on an interim basis. So really kind of an unusual career path, and one that I'm actually really proud of. I'm a bit of a Swiss Army knife, but it's not necessarily one that kind of deeply resonates with some clients. So yeah, it's an interesting one, and I know you've spoken to loads of great guests on your podcast about, redundancy. I guess one thing that really always strikes me is just how different that redundancy process is, and how much different it is finding a role after that when the business you've worked for sadly becomes, completely insolvent, goes completely tits up in the
Mm.
case of Paperchase and Ted. So yeah, I mean, pretty just to give you a flavour of the roles, most ecom director or digital director roles are the same, digi trading, digi marketing, some product and conversion rate optimization and UX stuff. And then I've also been looking after customer services in my last few roles as well. So
Right.
really, really broad.
Well, I quite like that career where you've done this, you've done that, you've done this, because weirdly, all that's adding up to is lots and lots of experience, right? And
Mm.
I spoke to someone yesterday, I recorded an episode yesterday, which I'll be putting out later, an amazing lady with a quite unique story, but she describes herself as a marketing generalist. And weirdly, that really resonated with me. I describe myself as an advertising generalist, as in
Mm.
I've delivered everything over the last 23 years, and I've delivered a lot of everything. So weirdly, to start there's a lot of pigeonholing at the moment. There's a lot of we only want a perfectly square peg to go in this square hole. No, if you haven't done exactly what they're looking for, as opposed to I've done lots of things over 23 years, and same with
Mm.
you, like your journey is so varied. It weirdly feels like it should add a huge amount of positivity and a big, kind of a sense of, wow, this person can come in and do this, even though you might not have done it for the last year or two. It might have been your previous role. It seems so hyper focused at the moment. But I'm a massive believer in experience is going to trump specialism in the long term. So I think you'd be in a good spot. But the Ted Baker thing, yeah, it's clearly it's been everywhere, and certainly recently. And I know you're officially came into the Badlands a few weeks ago. But how was that when you were told? And I assume you kick into job hunting gear immediately, or did you take well, you know what, were you aware that it was quite tricky at the moment, given some of your ex-colleagues and friends are in a similar Badlands position? Like, how did you go about it? How did you approach it?
It's a really interesting one because I guess, I came out of Aviva at the end of 21, took voluntary redundancy, and then quickly moved into the Paperchase role, and obviously Paperchase, very sadly, we were talking about as well. I swear to God, it's not me, it's the kiss of death. But Paperchase also very sadly, hit the skids. So I've been in and out of the job search, I guess, on and off. My role at Monsoon Accessorize was interim. So on and off, been in and out of the job search over the last, I guess, 3 years. So it wasn't, coming into this environment was not as brutal a landing as it kind of has been for a lot of people who've been in work for a lot of years, or not been searching, or a couple of people I know like you have come back to the UK after a stint abroad and really felt and noticed that change.
Yeah.
So I was either lucky or unlucky enough that I've been exposed to the kind of the current environment, so knew what to expect. But I guess to answer your question about the TED issue, I joined in October last year, was with a very clear expectation that this was a turnaround, and actually, quickly got into the role and realised probably within a couple of weeks that the business was completely unviable in its current state. Yeah, yeah. So not really a shock for me. It's been a bit kind of twisty and turny because obviously, Ted is owned globally, licensed, the brand owner is Authentic Brands Group, and you just don't expect something within a business that big to fail so quickly. So it was a shock, no two ways about it. But I guess much less of a shock for me than the people who, perhaps didn't see that coming or thought they'd seen this before at TED and it would, the business would get over it again. So it was not too brutal, neither the landing nor the news for me per se. But I'm sure you've had a lot of guests who've had similar situations. You've got a large team, and your focus quickly becomes about supporting them through the process, through the redundancies, and into kind of you hope new jobs. So that's kind of, without wanting to sound like a saint, because I'm certainly not, but that's kind of been my focus, as well as looking for roles myself. And I guess that gives you another angle and lens on what's going on out there from a recruitment point of view.
Yeah, because it's, forgive me, it's a few hundred people, right, in the UK. It's a good few hundred people
Yeah,
across the board to take on.
yeah, really sizable, and
Yeah,
being let go since the start of this process in April. I think everybody hoped that a new buyer would be found and the business would continue and carry on.
right. So that
And
was still part of the up until at some point that was still a hope within the business. So you were kind of still working and still trying to kind of make it happen in terms of your role.
no, mm,
Was there a point where it was communicated that it was like, actually this is done, or was that quite kept quite quiet?
um, I think we were told before the rest of the business as a leadership team, but
Yeah,
within short order, things were as transparent as they could be. But
yeah,
I mean, again, a blessing and a curse. But when you've seen it once,
yeah, yeah,
you can see it coming, perhaps a bit sooner than people who haven't. So yeah, although it's an experience I wouldn't wish upon
no, of
anybody,
course.
experience does at least bring you some knowledge and a level of control about these things. So yeah, it's a very strange situation, and of course, in addition to it being a strange situation, uh, relative to other types of redundancies, it does also have huge financial implications because, if a business is insolvent and you're made redundant as part of that process, there really is no safety net. There's
Yeah, yeah.
statutory government redundancy and notice, but it's nothing for people who've been there, 10 years, 12 years, just really horrendous. So yeah, there's a slightly different dynamic than when you're laid off by a large corporate.
Yeah, restructuring versus, hey, we're shutting the doors on this thing is a
Mm,
completely different thing, right?
mm,
A good friend of mine, ex-colleague of mine, I would has no hesitation in saying much better at the job than me, was made redundant at the beginning of this year, simply because the business that she looked after from a global point of view at the ad agency was moved back to the US, even though the last few years it had been going gangbusters and they'd been outperforming, they've been doing amazing stuff. So business decisions made by other people elsewhere meant that she lost her job. Her role was made redundant in that particular London office. But because of that, she got a decent, had a helping hand in the kind of transition
mm.
out of the business. So as opposed to they were closing the doors on that agency. So yeah, hugely different. And I can only imagine the stress and heartache and fear that's arisen in a lot of people. They say if you've been through it once or twice, it softens the blow, but it's still
Mm.
hard to go through. In terms of, did you kick into, I know, looking after your team and things, I understand what that would be like from a senior point of view, having had numerous teams as you have. So I get that, but there's a point as well where self-preservation, you start looking for your next thing yourself. And I assume that kicked in early, and how have you found that? Because I assume it's the same as a lot of other people. But yeah, it'd be interesting to hear your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, very much so. So again, this bird's eye view I have of the market, of how it's been. You've interviewed a couple of interviewed. You had as guests a couple of my support network from Aviva, Lucas and David. I've seen how hard it is for people I really respect who are in the Badlands, and looking for roles. So yeah, from day one, I'm pretty honest. Some might say too honest, but from day one, I told my team, all of them, that it was time to start thinking about brushing up their CVs, and told them dead straightly that I'd be looking for a new role. So yeah, day one, that urgency kicks in. And I think one of the things that does really surprise people, your guests and people out in the industry, just how long this job search takes. So, I started counting my search from when I started looking in March. It wasn't from when I finished at TED, but yeah, it takes an age. If you're lucky, something will come along, or maybe there's some interim, but you've really got to be prepared for a sort of a Sisyphus slog in the Badlands, I always think. And that's my warning to people now, which is, if you're going to need a job, don't wait, start now.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the chats I had with a creative, he hadn't been particularly paying attention to the market because he'd just had his head down and been working incredibly hard at a place for 2 years, and he'd been a permanent freelancer for like 20 years. So he'd always done like 18 months somewhere, really, really hard graft, and then thought, I'll take a month or two and then I'll start my next one, which had been the case over 20 years. And this was 9 months ago, and he hasn't been able to find his next one because it's just a different environment that he came out into after. And so it's the new normal, which is an awful thing. It's an awful. It is the new normal, and weirdly, there's two sides to doing these podcasts. A, it's talking to people like you and putting your episode out so you can share it and people can hear about you and your skills. But equally, then it's about the other people who are also in the Badlands hearing it and going, "Oh Christ, it's not just me. I'm not the one not getting these jobs, or I'm not the one who's it's taking forever," because it is the norm at the moment. And I think by understanding that, you can then plan a little bit differently. You can do other things, and you can tackle some of the challenges that come with long-term Badlands exposure a bit better. I think
The more we talk about it, the better. And I'm really, really heartened to see recruiters talking about this in particular as well on LinkedIn. And
yeah,
this it needs to be, the more we talk about it, to your point, the more we can start, take practical action, as well as, stop victim blaming ourselves and worrying that we're shit. We all have those moments where you think, my God, I'll never work again. My career's over. I'm going to have to take a massive step back. Nobody cares about what I've done. You can be the most resilient, confident, glass half full kind of person in the world. But, still have those days where, those bad thoughts creep in. And yeah, the more we talk about how rough it is, the better, because it just helps people prepare mentally and emotionally, as nothing else.
no, for sure. A friend of mine, an ex-client of mine who became a friend of mine, she's highly experienced from the fashion industry, and she's been out now probably 6-7 months, and she's convinced that she'd never get back in. I think she's applying a little bit of ageism to it, and I think that's based on her experience of now trying to get back in. So there are some realities to it, and it's not all. If you're in a position where the wolf's not quite at the door, then you can take a little bit of a beat and think, well, actually, it will pass. All of these times do. The pendulum will swing back to more opportunities coming that you can put yourself forward to. But in the moment, yeah, it does feel dark. And I still have those days. Kind of doing these Badlands podcasts was slightly to fill the days and the loneliness and feeling shitty. At least then you're having chats with people and Because it's a big part of it. It's a weird thing when you go from working in teams, working with brilliant people, loving what you do, to then, I know you sit at home now until, you
Until
find it
your
quite hard.
partner's really struggling on it, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm like, is it, because I went through that phase of like 3 o'clock's all right for a gin and tonic, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
fine, 3 o'clock.
yeah,
But
especially on a
that
sunny day.
that gets dangerous. So yeah. So how have you found recruiters and your network? And I kind of ask it in a good, bad, and ugly, because I think there's always a little bit of everything. I have some amazing recruiters, and I've also come across some idiots. And I'm a bit like, well, how is your business surviving if you're being an idiot? I don't understand.
Well, they don't tend to have a very long shelf life, do they, recruiters? I mean,
I would
actually,
assume not. Yeah.
yeah, I was reading about this. A lot of them do, the shelf life for people who haven't been doing it forever, tends to be quite short. So actually, I think a lot of them don't survive. And the good ones, to your point, what I really find is that there's no consistency in who gets all the best roles. So, particularly for digital director roles, I think in marketing it's a little bit more concentrated for marketing director roles. But for digi lead roles, they are very spread out. There's a couple of agencies that have some great roles, but there's no kind of single nucleus or set of 10 agencies who get all the best roles in the same way there is for marketing. So you kind of have to talk to them all. And I mean, what I would say is there's a couple who are awesome, who I would consider to be, if not friends, but people who are looking out for my interest and me for them. They're the ones who will give me a call every now and then to say, how's the search going? How are you finding things? Do you want a coffee? They haven't got a role for me, but that really matters, and I know that they're in it, to try and find me a role for the long term. So I think there are some great ones. I think recruiters are, in some instances, fairly, I guess they are maligned as a group, which I don't think is fair. I've had some tremendous experiences, but your bar for tremendous experience may be pretty low. And I was reflecting on this morning. My bar for the best one I've dealt with recently was, she came to me on time when she said she would. She prepped me for the interview with the end client, and she gave me feedback when it didn't quite happen. And actually, I guess maybe that's quite a low bar, but it was a great experience, and that's how it should be. That's how it should be.
Weirdly, what you're describing there is the bare minimum that role requires. There's no.
Yeah.
Okay, so organize it on time, give you some insights. Yeah, that's the job, right? But that is amazing. You've just described an amazing recruiter at the moment, because there's quite I think my record now of feedback was 4 months later, and I had to search through my memory to go, oh, which one's she talking about? Which job? I couldn't remember. Like, I obviously moved on 4 days after you don't hear feedback. That's clear as
100%.
day, right? But 4 months, I was a bit like, man, that's a heck of a
What?
long call sheet that person has to get back to her clients. But
Yeah,
so
that
it just
poor.
made me laugh more than anything. So
Yeah.
look, they do come
Yeah.
in thick at the moment, and equally, I know from some conversations with friends in inverted commas within some of the more well-known recruitment consultants, it's tough for them as well at the moment. If there aren't jobs to be had, it's affecting that particular industry as well, right? It's if they make their bread and butter on filling roles.
They're under pressure. Yeah.
The sheer volume of job specs I see listed on jobs boards that just have a massive kind of no third parties, I'm a bit like, well, is that not cutting your nose off to spite your face? I thought you were looking for brilliant people, and those people know the brilliant people. So why wouldn't you go to, it's so short-sighted, and it's so kind of money-driven. I get the business side of it, but it feels really short-sighted to me. And I'm obviously biased because I've only ever gotten jobs through recruiters, and now having to do it myself, I ain't landed shit. So
It's Well, then there's maybe there's a correlation. This is an interesting one. I was talking to another friend, similar situation about this, and he said, "Well, where's your success come from?" And because I'm a bit of a nerd, my success, I haven't got a job, but where have the wins been? Have they been direct recruiter? Have they been, direct client, or have they been applications? And I did myself like a little table and did the counts, and actually, where I've had jobs before and interviews in this round, it's been a real mixed bag. There's no rhyme or reason. It can be a headhunter, it can be just, a straight recruiter, it can be I've applied, or it can be internal talent teams reached out to me. So I'm an advocate, just from my own experience, of having every iron in every fire. But there's no two ways about it. At the top end of earnings, the best roles have come through internal talent teams or exec headhunters. So yeah. And that makes it tricky, right? Because it would be nice and comforting to think, well, maybe it's just not worth ever applying to get a job on LinkedIn, so I won't bother. But that's not been my experience, at least.
No, and I think you're right at the moment. It's like what would a good analogy be? It's like trying to lose weight. You can't do it by just doing one thing. You've got to
No.
pull on a lot of levers. You've got to do a lot of exercise. You've got to get your nutrition right. You've got to get your sleep right. It's not just one thing, and I think it's the same with the particular market that we're playing in at the moment. I was quickly doing a calculation in my head there. If I did that same Excel document exercise, it's probably one out of the big 10 moves I'd ever made in my career that was through serendipity and just me randomly meeting someone. All the rest were recruitment consultants who I, after a period of time at a place, had gone, I've had enough here, or I'm getting a sense they've had enough of me. So I'll move. And you put the feelers out, and then something would happen. And I guess that was the eye-opening thing for me last year, was like, oh, that world doesn't exist at the moment. So networking. The one I avoid is the easy apply
Yes.
LinkedIn thing, because I'm like, nothing is easy. So that's bullshit. You can't. What does it mean? If I press that, do I get the job? Like, that sounds too like easy apply.
Excuse me.
It should be hard because it would weed out a lot of idiots, right? So make it harder.
Well, you've just sparked a thought there, really, which is, this is one of the reasons why job hunting is so hard, right? Because if you were thinking about this, having success in your job, doing a really great job in your day job, if you and I ever have jobs again, but imagine that, you've got a job. One of the ways you achieve success is you focus on one thing and do it really well, or a couple of things and do it really well, and you work hard at it. But actually, focusing on one channel in the recruitment in the search for a job, that doesn't really work for the reasons we've just talked about. And then also, and I think this is one of the other, we'll come on to this, I guess, it's one of the reasons why I think it's so important not to ask people how's the job hunt going unless they're in a similar boat, because it's almost like this mentality, and I don't know where we got it from, probably in the olden days where you sort of walked around with your CV or something, but there's no correlation really between how hard you work to find a job and whether you'll find one. So that whole effort reward relationship, I think, is a bit skewed as well. And it almost, maybe this is just me, but that was sort of, you can get a bit of a feeling of shame, can't you, when someone says, oh, what's in your pipeline? And if you say nothing, it's almost, maybe there's some tacit feeling that perhaps you haven't worked hard enough at it. You're not really serious about finding a job. So
there was a guilt that I carried around for a while when I wasn't sat at my computer job hunting this afternoon. It's like,
yes.
Well, so fucking what? Like,
yeah,
100%. I reset myself, and I think it's important for anyone listening. Like, the way I reset myself was, I was thinking back to when I had changed agencies in the past, and 3 months would go by from the process of me asking my recruiter, is there anything going on? 3 or 4 weeks later, she might go, hey, these people there's a brief coming in from these people. A month later, you'd meet them. A month later, you'd sign a new job, right? So 3 months had gone by. And in that time, you'd been at work dealing with your day-to-day nonsense at work. So that time passed incredibly quickly. The difference was when you sat at home, it's like dog years, or it's like going around a black hole. And it's like Monday to Friday is 3 months when you're unemployed, right? That's what it feels like in terms of a timescale. And I had to remind myself that me reaching out to someone and then saying, cool, we'll set something up. And they set something up for 3 weeks later. You think, well, I'm available this afternoon. I've got nothing to do.
Let's do it tomorrow.
And it's like, no. That person's really busy at work. And by the sounds of things at the moment, lots of industries and all industries are super stretched. So if you think, almost reframing it, you have to take a beat and you have to kind of, but then you deal with the guilt of, should I be playing golf today? It's like,
yeah, should I go to the gym?
Monday, like, yeah, of course. It doesn't matter. Like, as long as you can almost keep the little bits of traction going and then give yourself a little bit of a break. There was one of the episodes I did with Hassan Kaya, who's a leadership coach, and he helps people transition from jobs to like totally different sectors and career moves and stuff. And he was saying, if you don't look after yourself and aren't in a good mental place, i.e., doing the things, so it's making sure you do some of the things you really enjoy in life, then if an opportunity comes along out of the blue, which most of the time it does, if you're not in a good space, it will come across that you're not in a good space, So you almost have to keep yourself buzzed and energized and enjoying life a little bit in case that thing does come out of the blue, which, more often than not it does. So I've become a big believer in it. I sometimes have to justify it to my wife. It's like, you're playing golf again? I'm like, yeah, but I might get a job interview tomorrow. So I've been in a good place and I've got a bit of a tan. So there's a
I felt the same. Yeah, you do. Like, oh, I'll still go and get a massage or whatever. You can. And I guess, yeah, but you have got to let go of the guilt. And I feel like that for me is unraveling that whole mindset that the harder I look, the better it gets. Therefore, I've got to spend every minute on LinkedIn. Therefore, I can never amuse myself. Yeah, that's really bad. And actually, I think to your point on the mood and mindset thing, it must come across to recruiters when you're bored and tired and fed up with looking for jobs and not enthused. I've caught myself a couple of times kind of reeling off my job history, and even I don't sound excited by it. And that's the point at which you shouldn't be ever talking to these people who are, they're gatekeepers, because if you're not, to a point, mentally, physically well, yeah, 100%. So yeah, I'm with you, big advocate. And
no, I got it wrong at the back end of last year, and I wasn't looking after myself in the sense of day to day, and I recognize that now. And I do recall a recruiter asking me, "So, what is it you're looking for? Where would you, where's the dream place?" And I think I said, "Oh, anywhere near fucking London Bridge. I don't care." Like, because I was just thinking it's an easy commute, and I was like that. And after I got off the phone, I was like, that wasn't the right answer.
Yeah, you were not on your best form.
It was true, but it wasn't what was required. And I was a bit like, it's just any of the fucking agencies down there. Who cares? They're all the same.
Yeah,
which is true. But yeah, so you have to be pumped. You have to be, and weirdly, and this is a selfish thing, but me when I have these conversations with people like you and anybody I'm speaking to, either pre-recording or when I record episodes, it genuinely I love it. So it's become this thing that is part of my process now of keeping myself up during the week. If I'm recording one of these and putting one of these out, that's not me job hunting. That's me just doing something interesting and exciting, and then you can have a conversation if that phone does ring from that recruiter who said they'd ring you 4 months ago. So yeah, it's a vital part, and I think it's probably it's the biggest tip I try and give out is don't beat yourself up, because you've got to look after yourself, I guess. And so we're slightly covering the mental health piece that I try and talk about. I assume, I mean, it's redundant to talk about it. That's a poor phrase to use talking to you, Rhea. I apologize. Your own mental health, when that kind of inevitability of redundancy came about, I think you've already said you've got to look after yourself, but is there anything you've been doing specifically, or have you just used your experience to kind of keep your head high and give yourself the ability to kind of keep going?
I know we joked because you said I was the only person that had ever sent you over some notes ahead of time, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you
Which
know,
which is weird, which I loved, but
which is
it's like,
weird.
oh
Yeah.
man, gotta read these now.
She's one of those. Totally anal. Yeah, I like my lists and my spreadsheets, and that sense of structure is something that I do miss when I don't have a job. So for me, it was important. I guess to just set some goals to do while I'm off, and they're not, this isn't, they're not massively stretching goals. I've got some learning to do. I wanted to spend some time with my family, since which I hardly ever get a chance to do up in the Midlands. I've set myself some more personal ties. I'm going to finish War and Peace for the first time in my life. So, yeah, there's some stuff that I know I want to do that's just personal fulfillment and objectives.
It's the weird upside of the Badlands is you do get to do these little things that you've never done before. And again, if you can manage the guilt, which it sounds like you and I are doing well, and that people listening get a hold of the guilt because it's fine. Just apply yourself a little bit every single day. That kind of attrition will get you something eventually. But yeah, you
Yeah.
get to do these little things like my golf games come on leaps and bounds. It's unbelievable how much time I've been able to spend to try
When
and
else
improve.
would you be able to do it? And I've
Exactly.
always thought this, I could get a dream job next week and I could be there for 10 years. This is almost like having a sabbatical, except it's one with no
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
But you've got to do the things you can enjoy because to your point, in a couple of days or months or weeks, you could have a new job and that ceases. And I know I put it in my notes to you, but I had quite a nasty episode of burnout, albeit quite short lived, a few years ago. And actually, that experience for me helped me put a lot of things in perspective about work. Shed a lot of perfectionism on unnecessary those drivers of burnout. People pleasing, perfectionism, control freakery. So actually, that experience, as vile as it was, has really helped me reframe my relationship with work. And I will always want to work. I love to work. I'm a hard worker and the I enjoy the intellectual aspects of the work that I do. So, I would never not work, but equally I know what happens if you literally can't.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not the end of the world. You get over it. So yeah, that adversity period actually has really helped with this because, work is not the be all and end all. Take the financial aspect away, which is really very significant, I know, for an awful lot of people. But as long as you can pay your bills for a bit, this is not the absolute worst thing that can ever happen to a person. It really isn't.
No, no, for sure. And I think it kind of leads on to, you know, the heroes and the kind of support network that I kind of want to touch on because everybody needs them when you're in the Badlands. And it was actually
Mm.
one of your old colleagues, and I assume he was your boss at the time. Lucas was telling me he'd come across this book that talked about you almost need a posse of you looking for jobs at the same time, and it makes a huge difference when you can bounce ideas off each other, and because it can be quite a lonely experience, as we've touched on. So, in terms of your own heroes, it might be a strong word, but your own network, is there anyone you want to kind of call out or shout out? You don't have to, but I think it's nice to
Mm.
be able to go, you know what, these people have been brilliant. You don't have to name them, but just
Yeah, no,
explore.
I'm happy to name. I really the guys, I think I mentioned it earlier, but a couple of recruiters who I feel have really got my back and have built a relationship with me. The guys at Blue Digital, they are amazing, so
Oh yeah, yeah.
professional, and really I've found good communicators do what they say they will and really have built that personal relationship with me, so I find them superb.
Wait,
um
this is turning into an ad for those guys. I'm going to charge them.
No,
Some
I'll
sort of
move on. I'll do
sponsorship
some
thing.
others. No, honestly, I'm not paid by them. But Lucas, you mentioned, and David, we all worked together at Aviva. We were great friends at Aviva,
Yeah,
and
great guys.
they are great guys. We have regular chats, trivia ups, and pass roles onto each other, and have a great time together. So that's really nice to still have that relationship. And then I guess just a couple of other things. The things that And this is what I would encourage anyone who has a job to do for colleagues or friends who have made redundant. Just one, I don't want to sound like too Pollyanna-ish about it, but one thing that's really humbling, I find, when you're out of work is just how kind people are. I've had old suppliers ask if I want access to their tools so I can prep for, job interviews,
Wow.
which is just really kind. The kind words. I had a referral last week from someone I'd met just once at a conference years ago and got on with. I really, the heroes actually, I think, are those people who just do nice things for you when you're redundant. It's just really humbling.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
we forget actually that most people are decent and they want to help you. So the advice I was certainly giving to all of my team was, don't hide, don't be shy, reach out,
Yeah, yeah.
ask your colleagues, ask if anybody knows in that place you want to work, because most people do want to help you and pay it forward. So yeah, that always blows me away, just how decent people are really, and just that whole business karma does actually work.
No, it's an incredibly small world. It's an incredibly small industry, and yeah, they're kind of being kind and like we say, some of those recruiters and in-house talent folk that aren't particularly doing themselves a service at the moment, I think they'll get found out and karma's a bitch. And I was again talking to Lucas, who's come up now a few times on this. Yeah, he was very he talked about when you go back into work, having been in this period of, unemployed in the Badlands, like slightly taking back a different attitude and trying to help more and more people. And yeah, it does affect you. And you're right. These people who just reach out now and again, they are the heroes. So yeah, it's a people business, and you're right. Your ex colleagues and team members shouldn't, or anyone listening, shouldn't be afraid of reaching out to anyone, because it's, what's the worst that's going to happen? They're not going to
The
get back
worst
to
that's
you.
going to happen, exactly,
You're in no
exactly.
different position than you were that morning or whenever you start that process. And Lucas was also saying that he thinks the job you're going to get, probably it might not even exist until you put yourself in that person's mind, or you can help formulate that job, or you start different discussions about a business and what you could bring to it. And so reaching out, I think, is, yeah, it's invaluable. You've got to keep doing it and not be shy of it. It's not be shy of doing it. So
You have got to
um
not be shy. You really haven't. And this again is to people who've not been used to this. I think that's a shock as well. To your point, in the old days, you wanted a job, you called up one of the recruiters in your sector and you said, I'm a bit bored, and they found you one,
yeah,
or you got a call and they did the work for you. It is a bit of a hustle now. There's no two ways about it. You can't sit and be passive, and you have got to use every tool that there is, really, every
yeah, for
contact.
sure.
So yeah, I think you're right. Um, it's funny, isn't it? Because we're all sort of, most of the people you interview have been marketers, but we can be incredibly poor at marketing ourselves at times unless we're
It's
prompted to
it's
do that.
it's my biggest takeaway from all of this over the last 6 months is how good we are at talking about brands, products, services, whatever, and then telling anyone about yourself, you're like, oh, I don't know where to start. It's like, well, no, you do. Apply all your business learnings to yourself now. It's
Exactly.
like,
Write
you know,
yourself a strap line. What are your three
yeah,
features and benefits? All that stuff. I completely
exactly,
agree. I completely
exactly.
agree on that. Yeah.
So one of the things I do just at the end of our chats is try to, because I do think there's a bit of manifestation as well. Like you're putting good stuff out there. So, is there an ideal role or sector or even company that you'd like to work for? Because you know what, fuck them. We'll send our shit to them. We'll send your podcast to them. It's like,
In
if
the
there isn't an
spirit of
individual
just
company, it's
ask.
fine. But like, I think it's good to understand what you're looking for, because it's a big part of being in the Badlands. Sometimes it might change, and sometimes you go, you know what, this time has shown me, actually, I don't like selling airline seats. I want to move into something else. It's like you can gives you that perspective. So, is there an ideal role or sector that you'd love to work in?
I mean, I think I'd love to stay in e-com. D2C e-coms is what I love, and it'll probably be another digi director role or CTO role. And it's really, as you try and articulate kind of your career moves to recruiters or other people or whatever, I guess the way I talk about digi director roles is it brings everything together. I get to
Yeah, yeah,
use a broader range of skills. You sometimes you're doing tactical stuff and sometimes it's more strategic. sometimes it's kind of quite operational and nerdy, and then other times you're kind of working on the creative strategy and the customer journeys and stuff. And so I really love that breadth of everything that digi roles bring. So yeah, I think it will be more of the same. I'm determined that the next business will not go bust, because I don't know if my reputation would ever recover from three in short order. But yeah, I really love hairy challenges. I'm at my best when I'm kind of faced with something huge to solve, scary, is my best. So it will be D2C, it will likely be e-commerce, and it will be a really hairy challenge. And beyond that, I'll keep an open mind.
Well, that's great. I mean, what you're describing there sounds like it should be just around the corner, right? Given the nature of the world at the moment. So I think clearly you'll be fine, I'll be fine, everyone in the Badlands will be fine. Ultimately, it's about perseverance and keeping going and knowing it's not necessarily you, it's the world we inhabit at the moment, it's the sector, it's the industry, it's the state of the nation. There's a lot of things at play. It's about keeping positive and keeping going, and sending that request and sending that kind of note and not being afraid of it and ashamed of it. Just keep plowing away. I think it's the number one thing that I've learned, and most of the people I've spoken to agree that's the thing that's keeping them going and keeping them sane. And you're clearly doing it, even though technically you've only been in the Badlands for a few weeks. You've certainly been in it since the announcement. So yeah, look, I can't thank you enough for your time. I've loved talking to you offline, and love talking to you today. There'll be a lot for people to take away there. So I can't thank you enough
Thank
for your
you so
time.
much. Loved it.
No,
Enjoy
no,
your
look,
golf.
right. I'm not playing today. I played yesterday, and I can't justify more than one a week. That would start getting really, really, really hard conversations with my wife.
No, fair enough.
No, yeah, that's fine. So look, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, Jared.
No
Speak
worries.
soon.
You too.